Yeah, we'll just all talk about what's on our sheets.
No, like we'll go like.
So it sounds like everyone has their arguments prepared. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna face each other with the negative facing this way, positive facing this way. So if you'll arrange your chairs. I keep laying my clicker down. Here it is. So let's talk about expectations during the debate. So first of all, the content's what's important here, right? And it's good to get into character to a degree, but we certainly want to be respectful. One person talking at a time. There will be one spokesperson for each table. We're going to do 2 rounds, and I'll talk about that in a minute, in terms of speaking, and then we'll do a summary round. And it is appropriate to switch speakers after the rounds. You don't have to, but I would encourage it because that gets more participation. Whoever is not the speaker, you have at the table this sheet. It's kind of a score, what I would call a score sheet. So regardless of which table you are at and you represent, you're keeping track of the positives and the negatives, or the attaboys and nah, they didn't do so good, for their arguments, because we're going to see who won the debate. And 4 different people will be tracking that, okay? And you can take turns tracking that as well. So, one person talking at a time. Keep your voice level within this context here. Respectful talk, no dissing, no raising your voice and getting angry. Each person that is speaking, I will time you. You'll have 1 minute to speak. And you're responsible for all parts. So if you're a teacher affirmative, you're still responsible for student negative, student positive, teacher negative, and so on. So everyone, you need to be jotting notes about the positives and negatives for each aspect. Remember, our resolution is, it's been resolved, Tennessee teacher evaluation scores should be based on student achievement. The way that the regular rounds will work, affirmative A will present their argument, and then the negative A will respond. And then affirmative B will present their argument, and the negative B will respond. We'll do that twice, and then we'll have a summary round where it's flipped. Right? So, let me get my timer, and we will begin. Raise your hand if you're going to be the speaker for your group this first round.
Do second.
Okay. All right, and so what I'd like,
Here's this.
are you okay sitting like this, or would you like to face each other? Okay, we'll see how it goes this first round. All right, let me get my timer up. Any questions about how this process works? All right.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay, Madison is going to start us off with the affirmative for teacher impacts. Say go.
Okay, so according to this report, the Teacher and Administration Evaluation in Tennessee, it was over 4 years of the teacher evaluation. They found that most administrators and teachers believe evaluation improves their performance. It helps them with their professional growth. 81% of teachers found that it helps them identify areas for growth for the next year. And then 95% reported that their performance was improved from the evaluations they received. And then also, like, students love to get or need feedback. Teachers also need feedback and want more feedback on their work. 71% of the teachers reported that the evaluation provided clear expectations. It's laid out for them. They know what criteria they're supposed to be working towards. And then 64% of them thought the evaluation was appropriate. And that will change from content area to content area. But they also thought
Time's up.
that was me.
Okay. Okay, negative A, this is negative for teachers, and is that you, Becca? Nicole? Okay. Nicole, set, go.
Okay, so first off, so the teachers, they, oh God, I'm so bad at talking. Okay, so there are a lot of outside factors that can affect the teacher's score, like the value-added assessment model implies that all of the student learning is based on the teacher, whereas their research shows that outside factors such as class size, curriculum, instruction time, tutors, resources, home community challenges, health, attendance, peer culture, prior teachers, and other current teachers that students are currently in classes with. Summer learning loss especially affecting socioeconomic different levels, and the specifics of the test used highly affect the student and the way the teachers are scored. So basically it changes based on the students that are put in your class. It's super unreliable in between grades, so one teacher that's teaching 4th grade could switch to 5th grade and their scores can drastically differ. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, remember that one person from each table is keeping track of, you've got your rubric, right? So let me, making sure that they're giving an effective argument and that they're using specific examples and team behaviors, so keeping track, all right? Okay, so now we're going to affirmative for students. So why this process is good for students. Let me turn my camera over here.
That's my closest.
Yes, okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Go.
Okay, so I just want to start off with some facts. So 63% of teachers said that like the evaluation process leads to improvements in student learning. In 2014, 2015 alone, Tennessee showed gains in like math and science, like TCAP scores, but reading scores declined from the prior year. So like this, I'm using this just because like test scores definitely do need to be evaluated just because we need to monitor them just to make sure Tennessee's meeting literacy in college and like career readiness goals. Yeah, students need to be like observed like on improvements and things in the classroom, but also test scores are important just so they are meeting those goals because they'll need like those when they get out into the real world. The Tennessee evaluation system needs improved feedback. That is one of the things that teachers like talked about in here. But once that is done, it will yield improved results for both teachers and students. So teachers are saying
Stop.
we need better feedback.
Okay, thank you.
So,
All right, so now you get to do the affirmative. You get to, no, did I go over here yet? Just kidding. All right, and so now we're going to do negative for the negative impacts on students. Okay, you ready?
Okay, so the new federal Every Student Succeed Act actually doesn't require states to have educator evaluation systems, which I think is a good alternative. If a state chooses to keep these like tests and stuff, it doesn't have to be based on test scores. So you can have evaluations, but they not be based on test scores. So it still can be teacher performance and student performance. Researchers actually calculated that teacher influence on student test scores ranges from as little as 1% to 14%. So it's like she was saying, it has more to do with outside factors, demographics, their situation in life, how well they do on tests. So students are losing access to untested subjects such as history, science, art, music, second languages, and phys ed, because we're also focused on math and science. It's like you were saying, we tested well on that, but we didn't do so well in literacy. So why should we focus more on that? And by narrowing our content, we're going to lose student success. And as such, we're going to lose good teachers because they'll be discouraged because of a flawed system such as this.
Time's up. Thank you. Okay, now affirmative, you get to give a rebuttal to the negative side, starting with teachers. Okay, ready?
yeah. All right. Well, it fosters continuous improvement if we do have evaluations for the teachers because they want to be able to see how they're doing and how they can improve for their students. 63, I have some facts, 63% of the teachers reported that the evaluation process leads to improvement in student learning. So what we were talking about, if you have students in this area, you can base it off of them. So if they have their scores, if they're having trouble, like struggling, you can base it off of them. And then if you have a higher skill, you can progress them faster. And then 86% of administration said that evaluations help them improve
improve as professionals. So one thing is, are you making a difference for your students?
All right. And now the negative for teachers who's speaking this time? Christopher?
You say that evaluations are good, but what if you have a student that tests high in the state standards or in the state testing, and he doesn't show improvement, and put your job on the line because he didn't improve while he was in your class from the years past? Also, there's another one point that they'll have to add up to 1,500 new tests just to have data to evaluate the majority of the educators besides the math and reading and science teachers, so that y'all will be able to be evaluated by the test scores and keep a job.
Okay. Do you have a same speaker or a different speaker?
Grant.
Okay, Grant, I'm going to kind of, don't have to look at the camera, but just kind of turn. So we can-
So you guys said that we are flawed because we focus only on certain courses, but I think those courses are more important just because as a society they've talked about, and I mean, there's a reason we test them more. It's because they are more important, and it gives us the students more of a voice when they have that large a percent of the teacher's score. I think they really can determine the future of the teacher. And I think the team just allows teachers and school leaders to have like an ongoing dialogue about what is happening in the classroom and how to manage that.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so now we're going to go to a summary round. So, I'm sorry, I don't mean to forget you guys. I really don't. I apologize. Jacob, are you going to speak this time?
Yeah.
So, yes, I need to get you right. Okay.
All right. Let's see. Now, there's been lots of things that you guys have talked about very well about research and stuff, but our research showed that, well, there was little evidence that teachers really do better because of the tests. And there were very little evidence that the teachers that are removed because of the tests will be replaced by better ones at all. And example of some of the problems with the system is the math you learn in, say, a physics class is credited to a math teacher even if that math teacher was horrible at their job. It's still credited because of that physics class. Similar with history. An English class that didn't teach any essays would be credited for the essays, learning skills that are taught in, say, a history class. And there's just problems and biases still in the system that cannot really be...
Time's up.
Okay.
All right, good job. So now we're going to, this is our final round, it's the summary round. So the summary round, remember, is starting with the negative A, so those that see the negative impacts on teachers. Is that you, Becca? Okay, when you're ready.
So this is the summary. So it's all messed up. Okay, so we started out with the value-added model, that it's not necessarily showing our scores correctly, and it's not, it should not be used as the sole basis for making consequential decisions about the teacher. It's too imprecise to get those decisions made. Also, the excessive focus on basic math and reading scores leads to narrowing and oversimplifying the curriculum to only the subjects and formats that are being tested, so you teach to the test. So it's giving less attention to the science, history, arts, civics, and most importantly, the problem-solving task. Kids these days just don't know how to problem solve anymore because they're focused on exact answers and for math and reading. And it also discourages teachers from wanting to teach. It's become so difficult to get good scores that they're like, why even bother anymore?
Time's up.
Teacher shortage.
Okay. Summary for affirmative for teachers.
Okay, so the teachers really do, I believe, benefit from these evaluations. It helps them know if their students are understanding their teaching, lets them know if they need to change their methods, or how effective their teaching is if they're connecting with their students. It also helps them with different areas, such as planning and classroom management, which is a big deal. It helps, yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, and then we'll come back to the negative for students.
We just want to reiterate that, not necessarily that evaluations are bad, it's just that test score centered evaluations are bad because that takes away from student learning based evaluations. So if we're trying to make it about the student, which last time I checked, that's what the schools are supposed to be about, then I think it would benefit us because, well, like she said, if we're losing all these good teachers, what we're left is teachers who are narrowing curriculum, we're not being taught problem-based skills, their teachers do not have more than a 14% effect on our test scores. So why include that to their detriment or not to their detriment? Because at the end of the day, if I'm testing in the 96th percentile as a student and I don't improve that year, so is my teacher going to be penalized for that just because I might have tested accidentally in the 95th percentile? I don't see that as fair because I don't think that my excellent teacher who got me to the 96th percentile should be punished in the first place. So yeah.
Okay, and we're going to wind up with the affirmative was positive about students.
Evaluations can be good for the students, especially when you look at testing. We need to use testing to improve in areas of literacy in all subjects being taught. The question is, should teachers be evaluated using these scores? It is good to have a way to compare students to their peers, and using testing does this. The teacher should be evaluated because the students are the same age, they've had the same experience in school, and they should all be improving together. If they aren't, there's a problem within the system, and the student deserves a chance.
Thank you. Good job. Okay, so now I'm going to ask you all who are taking notes on the debate, over here with the affirmative A, based on what you heard on both sides, which group would you say, affirmative or negative, won the debate and why? Do you need a minute to look over?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, you guys are ready?
Yeah.
Okay. What are your thoughts?
So negative and positive in one?
Yes.
Okay, so I think on like the negative sides of test scores, Carlton and Jacob.
Well, I mean, like, just negative or just positive?
Okay, what points were made?
Well, just which one won the overall argument about test scores, that their argument was no, we should not.
Negative.
Why?
Oh,
Based on the rubric. Which somebody was supposed to be taking notes on that.
Grant took the notes.
Okay.
Well, I thought she used very specific examples of the 96th percentile students. She also used effective statistics. Some people kind of threw some in, I felt like, and they weren't very relevant, but I think all of hers and theirs were pretty relevant.
Okay. What did you all over here think?
I
I agree with our side.
I was the one doing the notes, and I must say everyone did a good job using examples. But the problem came down to, like, there was one X instead of one plus, so the negative side won because let's see, one of the arguments for the affirmative didn't use it as specific examples, so it lost that category.
So your score sheet showed that the negative side won.
Yes.
Okay, okay, that one. All right, what about over here?
Negative.
Because?
Well, a lot of the arguments made on the positive side we countered with examples from the text. And what else do we got?
And more specific examples.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, I think this, specific is a big.
Big
part of
factor?
it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and lastly, this table here,
Negative. Probably.
And I
because?
think we're all kind of biased
Yeah,
towards the
I'm
negative
biased
side too,
anyway.
so.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good
I
point,
think
so.
that makes an impact.
It does, it does, and so we're asked in a debate to remove our biases, which is impossible to do. Now, here's sort of a rhetorical question. The resources that I provide as a teacher to the groups is going to impact your opinion in terms of what you have access to, right? So, for example, and I didn't do an exhaustive search, full disclosure, I did, I searched about looking at pros and cons on this. And when it came to the pros, the only information that I really found was from the Tennessee Department of Education.
Yeah.
That's all I have here, right? Now, I didn't spend like a tremendous amount of time trying to dig and find. There is research that backs up using the team model, but not anything that I could find. That's not to say it's not there, but in a preliminary search, I didn't find anything. The negatives was a no-brainer. There was lots of information, and the negatives take that information, and so they're using it where you didn't have that same advantage to use the kind of information that they use. So now, interestingly enough, in my previous class, this side made a better argument than this side. So part of it is the ability of your participants to read and analyze and synthesize. This is high-level processes here, right? So with all of that said, like you said, you have a bias, whatever your philosophical standing is on this issue, the current reality is that in the state of Tennessee, we're in this process. So you need to think about, as a new teacher, how am I going to deal with something I don't agree with? Now, if you go into a school, you've been hired, and you start mouthing off about not agreeing with this, chances are you're not going to keep your job. Tennessee is a right-to-work state. They can fire without any giving you a reason. You can be a level 5 teacher, and at the end of the year, they can fire you. They can say, I'm not hiring you back. Or they can hire you in the middle of the year. So my advice to you is that you understand the way it works. And that your first priority is to your students. And that, yes, you love your content area, but you're doing this for the students. And this is not a notion about like teaching to the test. Let's say you're a freshman in college and you got a biology exam. Do you want to know what's on that exam? And do you want to be prepared for it? Sure you do. So there's nothing wrong with preparing students to be successful on a test. Now, if all you're doing is teaching how to take that test, and that's where your limited focus is, that's an issue, right? So if you go in, this is my opinion, this is me talking, that if you go in where you have a love for those students and you get to know them and what their needs are, and you use that test data from the previous year, you got this group coming in, and you see what they're good at and where they're struggling, and you use that data to inform your instruction, and you're providing the squeeze ball for the one that's this and the translated versions and whatever it is, and they don't have to have an IEP or a 504 for you to make accommodations for their needs and how they learn best, right? You do what's best for your students. And you're standards-based. You can't just teach whatever you want. The tests are based on the standards. And so you've got these you've got these standards, and in some areas they're very broad. In PE, they're very specific now. In history, I think they're very broad.
Very broad.
And so they're so, like, what does that mean? And so then you got to unpack that, and you got to write these objectives that are in language, teacher-friendly language. And then you got to convert that into student-friendly language so the students understand, okay, this is what she wants me to do. This is what I'm supposed to learn. This is the performance he wants me to give. So you got to put it in their language. Now we know that the objective, the verb and the objective and the learning target should match. If it says explain, if it says discuss, if it says identify, if it says list, analyze, compare and contrast, whatever it is. Now the standard, there should be alignment also. But we know, like for example in history, before they can analyze a text, or in English, or whatever, or in music, before they can analyze, they're probably going to have to be able to identify. There's going to be some lower level things that they've got to achieve before they get to that place. So sometimes there won't be alignment in the standard because they're not developmentally ready for that. But you go in with the mindset that I know what my standards are, I know my content, I'm getting to know my students and what they need. And I know how to best, and maybe I don't know everything, but I've got this toolbox of strategies that I'm gonna use to go in and teach them. And I'm gonna learn from my mistakes, and I'm gonna continuously improve. You're gonna be fine. You won't have to worry about it. Most of you, if you're in Rutherford County in particular, you're gonna be in professional learning communities. You won't be alone. Other school systems are going to that model as well. I thought you guys did a good job. I agree that I think that the negative side provided a little bit stronger argument, but I also know that they were given more
Yeah.
specifics
Their info's.
than you guys were, so that's one issue. So going back over the learning targets, so, Bailey, would you tell me one thing, one measure, one piece of the teacher evaluation process? So in other words, identify one measure that's used in the Tennessee teacher evaluation model.
Like the rubric.
Okay, which rubric?
There's different ones.
The team or?
Team rubric. And what is the team rubric used to evaluate?
Teacher's ability.
Different things.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's different things, but what are the teachers doing when they're being evaluated? Teaching. Yeah, so it's
instruction.
it's an observation.
Instructional.
Yeah. So this instructional piece, this observation piece. So that's one measure. What's another part of the evaluation, Jacob?
The way like teachers are evaluated in general?
In general, in Tennessee.
Oh,
So there are observation scores, there's one. What's another piece?
the standardized tests.
The standardized test. There's another one. There's a third one. I only said two, but there's a third one. You guys talked about it.
Is it the VA?
The VAM, which is the value added model. What do we call it in Tennessee? Tennessee value. TVAS, Tennessee Value Added Assessment System. That measures growth. The point that Chris was making, like if I'm a student and I'm at the 98th percentile, and I've got to, in order to show growth, I've got to get to 100.
Yeah.
That's sticking hard. So people say, well, I don't want to teach in a low-level school because that's easy, y'all. It's easy to take a kid from a 50 to a 65. That's still not a good score, but that's great gains, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and teachers get punished, theoretically, so to speak, in a manner of speaking, because they can't get that 98 kid level to a 100. That's hard. That's hard. So those are the three measures. Okay, I can explain at least two impacts on teachers. So, Nicole, give me a positive impact for teachers. Positive. So in other words, what's positive about the evaluation system for teachers, the current one?
That it helps them improve on what they may have not gotten.
Okay, it helps them improve because what have they received? Theoretically.
They've received feedback.
Okay, so this current model is supposed to give teachers feedback so they can improve. Good. Okay, so Grant, tell me something that's negative about the teacher, that's harmful for teachers, so to speak, or the negative side for teachers.
It can be a little, it adds more stress to them because they worry about their students' test scores. They could only teach the curriculum and be super focused on one test instead of teaching them well-rounded knowledge.
Stressful, it's very narrowing and confining, what I'm hearing you say, is that correct? Okay, so Carlton, tell me something that's positive for students.
For being assessed,
Yes, for using the current model.
if they get good feedback, students thrive on feedback. So if they know that they did well on a test and they achieve based off of that. And it's the same for teachers.
Okay, so the feedback they get, so does this current model provide feedback to students?
Well, no, but aren't you like rewarded if you test well? Like sometimes they get moved up to higher level classes in the next academic year?
So the test does count a certain percentage of their grade, it counts towards a grade. So yeah, in that sense that, yeah, I scored well, so I feel good about this. But even, that could happen even if that wasn't being used to evaluate teachers. So that's an indirect, so can you think of something else, anybody on this side that would be a positive, and it might be indirect as well, but that would be a positive for students as it relates to this model?
I mean, teachers could just realize that they need to teach some things better, and then that could influence the student positively because they can actually understand it.
So it's sort of a trickle-down effect, that if the teachers are getting better because of the feedback and because of whatever, then that's gonna help the students. And certainly the students are gonna, if they get feedback, positive feedback, then they're gonna be more inclined to do better. What about something negative for the students, Madison?
They're being taught everything and only certain subjects and other subjects are just kind of like falling into the wayside.
So there's less access theoretically to certain curricula. They might not get as much music or art or PE, possibly, because there's so much attention paid, focused on English language arts and mathematics, for example. Okay, so you have successfully